Weather Wagers, we're back. We've got Brett Thackeray here, Dan Tomaso.
And we are rebranded. It is baseball season.
Wait, go back. I
we
wanted
need
to
Mr.
give
Shiner, too.
David Shiner a wave out. No, it's baseball
You're gonna see
season.
baseball
For the boys of
instead
summer,
football.
right here.
That's
Here
right.
you go.
And we do love football. We're going to talk about football. There is no off season, as we said last week, but let's get to the baseball season.
There is no off season, but Penn State keeps losing assistant coaches left and right.
Yeah, you know, we have hired a wide receiver coach.
We did.
Where from?
Colorado
State.
Colorado State, but first came through UConn with Jim Mora Jr.
He doesn't get enough credit, I
No.
think, for some of the programs he's turned
I
around.
honestly thought that his name would come up in the Penn State search because of the Northeast ties, and it never did.
It didn't, and again, I'm not sure fans would have been happy. He has a bad rap for some reason, but I'll tell you, UCLA.
Well, his time in the Falcons didn't go that well.
But UCLA might take him back again. I
Yes.
mean, you know, for all of the issues they have, he did win 9 or 10 games there a couple of times. But let's get into how you can find us. As always, new episodes drop Thursdays on ABC 27 News Plus. You can download the CTV app on your smart TV. We're on the web at abc27.com. And wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and of course, you can also find us on YouTube. We're growing each and every week thanks to you folks. And you can reach out, weatherwagers@gmail.com. But we are into baseball season, and I wanted to get right into talking about the Phillies. But you said, whoa, slow down, because we do have to talk about the weather, at least briefly, because I'll tell you what, spring is here, and we know that, because for those of you that don't know, meteorological spring started March 1st.
Yes.
And the reason that meteorological spring starts on the 1st of every month is the way that we keep records, and this is across the U.S. Records are kept March, April, May. It's just a little more clean than if you actually did it by the astronomical seasons.
Right, because the dates change, and trust me, I had to write a lot of computer code in college as part of my grad schooling. When something starts on the 1st of the month versus the 20th or the 21st, it can be a nightmare. It can be a nightmare to deal with, to sort data, and to work with it. And when you work with large data sets in weather, hence why we're still employed, that we have to interpret said data sets, you want some organization.
Yeah.
And by the way, too, the coldest months of the year are now behind us. That's the other good part about this.
Well, right. And listen, we've got the baseball background here going on for those of you that are watching. For those of you that aren't, let's talk a little bit about the weather, because for a while there, it looked like this first week of March was really going to heat up. And then all of a sudden, things started to trend the other way, and it has been foggy. It has been damp. It has been chilly.
Well, and parts of Pennsylvania have been very warm, whether it's Pittsburgh, even yesterday, Philly. It was like this U or this bowl forming right over central Pennsylvania where
it's the wedge.
The cool, damp weather is just here. Now, March is considered windy. We have had almost no breeze since March began, and that's part of the reason why we're so socked in.
But talk about, and folks may find this interesting, talk about that cold wedge, cold air damming, and why that does play with some forecasts, and why that is very impactful, especially in our region.
Yeah, so if you've ever been in an airplane and you've taken off and you're climbing, you're ascending, and you still don't have the loosening of restrictions yet, where you have your seatbelt on, you can't use your electronics yet, you are climbing through the lower part of the atmosphere. And if you've ever flown out of HIA, oftentimes in the morning it'll be foggy near the river, and then all of a sudden, within like a minute or so, you pop through that and it's blue sky and sunshine. That lowest level of the atmosphere is what remains stagnant. If you do not get a lot of wind, if you get more of an east flow of moisture coming in from the Atlantic Ocean, we're not a coastal city, but we are close enough to be influenced by the ocean. All of a sudden, that stagnant air doesn't go anywhere. And if you add rain onto that, like we have the last couple of days, it just kind of feeds on itself. So what you'll see on a day like even today on this Thursday or Friday, it will warm up very quickly west of the Appalachian Mountains, where air's free-flowing. All of a sudden, those Appalachian Mountains, even though they're not huge, they're not big, they're mostly bunny hills, it's enough to trap that cool, damp air in the valleys just to the east, and that's where we are.
Now, we do think we're going to warm up over the weekend. We have a cold front coming through, and that's another thing. No matter where you're listening to us, you're probably going to be getting some type of severe weather this weekend, because there is a rather strong front, and severe weather season kind of starting early March. But here you can see the front. It looks like it's going to be coming through here Saturday night into Sunday, and then next week I think we'll stay warm. But here comes another front by the middle part of next week that will cool us back down toward the end of next week. The model wants to spit out some snow there. I highly doubt that's going to happen. But here's that wedge that you talked about.
Yeah.
Look at the temperatures here as of this recording. It's in the 70s in the south, and it's in the 40s in the north, and that includes eastern Pennsylvania, where we are just wedged in.
So close. I
It's
mean,
so
if
close,
you
but-
zoom in even just a little bit there, which
Yeah.
we can at the moment, but you would see that it is right up against the mountains. And that's why I think today, I know you're pessimistic about the warmth. I could see areas west of the Susquehanna River today warming up pretty quickly.
No, I said on the air, I think Chambersburg, some areas in Franklin County, certainly
Cumberland
western
Valley warms up
Pennsylvania,
first.
it does, and it definitely could. But I'll tell you, that is a saying in weather, and we have it, warm air waits for no man. But there is one thing that can stop that, and that is
Well,
cold air damming.
And here's what happens. The cold air stays stagnant at the bottom, and the warm air will rush over top of it. And
Yep.
then unless you get enough wind to mix it all together or a little sun breaking through, it doesn't mix, and you stay kind of status quo.
But there is hope. Now, tomorrow, I don't think there's much hope. I think actually tomorrow could be worse. The east flow starts to
Look
kick
at
in a
Bowling
little
Green,
bit,
Kentucky.
a little bit heavier
Wow.
here. But look at but see,
Palm
Dan,
trees out there?
look at it. 80 degrees there, 40 in here. That's a 40-degree difference.
Yeah.
That's spring.
I think the models are overdoing this. I will say that, and
Well-
that's where I'm confident. I think that's been one flaw so far this spring is that when it wants to get cold in the guidance, it gets too cold.
Okay, it may be too cold, but I'll tell you this. I mean, I'm forecasting 45 tomorrow.
I don't think we're gonna have a sunny day.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting to 50 tomorrow, and I don't even know if we can get above 45. But 41 may be a little chilly. Now, over the weekend, though, I do think that's when we see this dam bursting by
Wind
Saturday
starts to
afternoon.
pick up out of the southwest.
60s both Saturday and Sunday. There you have it. And I think that over the weekend then is a signal that spring is coming. So speaking of spring, unless you wanted to add any more here, because
No.
I
I just want to have a quick discussion about it
there are signs that we are going to get in the 70s
next week.
next week.
Yeah.
Can that hold, or are the models going too warm?
No, I think it can warm as long as we get rid of this low-level moisture. And I think the issue the last couple of days has been the continuous light rain. When you, as I said, it kind of feeds on itself. If you keep adding more moisture to that lower level of the atmosphere, you end up with fog and drizzle in the morning. It's hard to break out of that.
It is, but we're going to break out of it. We're going to break out of it eventually. We're going to break out of winter. We're going to really head on into spring. And one of the things that we wanted to do, because we've got a very special guest coming up. We teased this guest last week. He's phenomenal. We're going to get to that. But let's have a little Phillies chatter because some things have happened since last week. And one of them is Johan Rojas is having some issues. You know, a friend of ours texted us about Johan. I'll let you tell everybody what's happening there. But I said, it's not really our problem. I mean, he's not going to be a starter for us.
No, he could have been maybe the 26th man off the bench as a speed piece on the base pass or maybe a defensive replacement.
And I like him.
Yeah.
He's very fast, but he also was not a huge contributor. Let's just be honest.
No. He's an extra player. But
Yeah.
the odd part about this whole situation has been it almost seems like this PED suspension or whatever the case is, a banned substance that was detected in his urine as a urine test.
Are we really going to talk about pee on this show?
I mean, it is what it is.
We're having a pee party.
Yeah, we're having a pee party. We don't want to poo-poo this too much, though.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
we
I had to go
we
there.
don't.
So
Do we have any sound effects for that? I doubt it.
there's been a lot of odd things with the WBC this year. So I'm mentioning the World Baseball Classic, and
Yeah,
so
and
he
I do want to talk to you about this because I love Major League Baseball, love watching the Phillies. I'm not a baseball guy. I can tell you a lot of different I knew Penn State hired a wide receivers coach from Colorado State. Pay attention to college football. You're the baseball guy on this podcast, there's no doubt. And we want to talk about the World Baseball Classic because that's going on, right?
Yeah, it started, and so pool play is starting. So each country is assigned to a different pool, and then
And that's in
eventually
Italy?
well, there's one in Italy. There's a pool in Houston. There's a pool in Miami. I think that's where the semifinals and finals are. So all this is happening, and you may say to yourself, "Well, I don't really care." What you might want to care because your favorite player may not be at spring training right now because they're with the country of their
Aaron Nola?
choosing. Yes, Aaron Nola is playing for Team Italy, and I got a couple questions about that. Well, why is Aaron Nola playing for Team Italy? Well, it's because Team USA is so stacked that there wasn't room for him on the Team USA roster.
Is he doing this to get back in tip-top shape, or what is the reason? Because I know it upsets some folks.
It does upset some people, but I think some of it is personal pride. It is only a 2-week tournament. It's not the huge commitment that the Olympics is. So I think it's fun. I think the players enjoy this. Team USA is an all-star team of all-stars. It is incredible the talent they've amassed. Them and Team Mexico, they are the favorites right now to win the whole thing. So Team Mexico could be very formidable too.
Is Mr. Harper on that team?
Mr. Harper's on Team USA, and I have a picture of him coming up.
So why did I not hear about people being upset about him playing in this? Is it because he's playing on the USA team and Nola's playing in Italy? Like, it's just weird to me that people really got upset.
It's for fun, everybody. I understand that there's an injury risk. However, these guys, there are restrictions in place to protect Major League Baseball teams. So
maybe the timing of it's right before the season. Yeah.
But Nola's looked good so far in spring training, and they made him stay for one extra start before leaving. And that start, I believe, was just yesterday or the day before.
So let's talk about Rojas, though.
Yes, so back to Rojas.
How big of an issue is this?
Well, we don't know. This is the odd part. So we don't know. There seems to be some speculation. And again, I'm not a reporter. I'm not following this day to day. Speculation that his drug test issue came up because of the WBC. And the WBC, depending on what country you play for, has different things they're looking for, including marijuana, other recreational drugs. And the thought was initially perhaps it was a recreational drug he tested positive for and not PEDs. And it's very interesting that that was the speculation because Major League Baseball has said nothing. Rob Thompson, as of Wednesday, was asked about this.
He didn't know much.
He didn't know anything yet. So to me, I think there's some confusion. Will there be a suspension? Will there not? Now, I didn't include this picture, but as of yesterday, the big news came out of Atlanta Braves camp that Jurickson Profar, their big signing 2 years ago, did test positive for a banned PED substance. So he is now suspended for a full season, 162 games, which is a massive blow.
Boy, what is going on in Atlanta?
Yeah, it has been a
wild
horrific spring training.
Well, it's been a horrific year, dating back to last March. Yeah. They never got off the ground in the season. Everybody got injured. They barely did. They
did not make the playoffs.
They didn't make the playoffs. No. They had a shot at it, but they didn't.
They ended up as one of the worst National League teams.
Terrible year for them, and it couldn't happen to a nicer club.
This is why I say to you, and I say to our listeners out there. You have to let things play out because they seemed like they were coming into spring training strong. They got some of their pitching back healthy until they didn't. So,
now, speaking of pitching, one of the reasons why you are pretty high on the Phillies still, and we talk about this with our guest today. The Phillies rotation is strong. The bullpen is strong.
Best.
And one of the guys that likely very well could have made a difference in that Dodgers series, and we might have a different conversation. And maybe I feel better about things as much as, again, the reason we've struggled the last few Octobers is because of the offense. You never know what good pitching can get you. And one of those guys, of course, is Mr. Zach Wheeler. And, the guy's got his rib in a – is it his rib in a –
Yeah, he kept his rib in a closet at his house.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy. He's throwing again. We don't know exactly when he's going to be ready. Now, Mr. Wheeler, though, and what I mean by that is the guy is ice. He's a competitor. He's elite. He, I'm sure, wants to be back for opening day. Now, we know that's not going to happen. At least I don't think so.
No,
but
I don't think it would be smart to even try.
But I don't think it's going to be that long. Do you?
No, I mean every single report has been extremely optimistic. He is a freak athlete, and I don't say this lightly. In his Phillies tenure, he is one of the best pitchers I've gotten to watch. It is a joy to watch him. Now, will he be at that level again? Hard to say, but let's take a step back. They don't need him to be at that tip-top level. They need 70-80% of Zach Wheeler, in my opinion.
One of the reasons for that is we do have other guys on the roster, and one of them everybody's been talking about for years is this gentleman. And this is Andrew Painter. People were really expecting him to come on strong. He got injured, and now he's back. I have two questions for you, Dan, because I know you've been watching. How did he look in spring training? And then the second question is he going to be part of the rotation this season?
So one of the things, and I believe it's mentioned in our interview too, when it comes to Tommy John surgery, so it's the UCL in your throwing elbow, and it's very susceptible to popping and tearing if you are a pitcher putting a lot of mileage on it.
Sure.
So almost in some ways, for some guys, you get this surgery done. Tommy John, they help your elbow ligament. There's a couple different ways they can do it. And some guys come back brand new, sometimes even better than ever in terms of velocity. The problem is, though, usually within that first year or so after the surgery, the command isn't there. So his walk total was up last year in the minor leagues. So
what people were concerned. I remember that. Yeah.
So people wanted to see this year, Usually by year 2 after the surgery, the strength is back, the command is back. He had a normal offseason. He had no setbacks. And his confidence in his interviews that he's done, I mean, he just seems like a guy more mature than his age, ready to go, ready to chomp at the bit here. And again, this was a piece we didn't have last year. It could be a huge difference maker. I don't want to put too much stock into it yet. We have to see it.
Is he going to be in the rotation?
Yes, to start the year, it does appear that way.
Wow. Okay, so that's
barring
big.
any big setback. And again, he's a rookie. You're going to have ups and downs. But just to have another live arm like that in an already pretty stacked rotation, keep in mind, I love Ranger Suarez. I'm a big Ranger Suarez fan. But people forget he had a very rough August into September time period. He had some back injuries.
2 years in a row, yeah.
It's almost like he would always hit a lull in the season.
Yeah.
And therefore, the team would hit a lull because his starts were unreliable.
You're right.
You just don't know. I mean, again, they could stack up very, very well this year if things click.
And one of the things that has to click, we've been talking about this, if you listen to Phillies podcasts, if you listen to Phillies Twitter, if you're immersed in Phillies chatter, one of the stories of the offseason was the feud between Bryce Harper and the front office. And another part of that is Bryce Harper did not really have a great year last year. He needs to be the guy. He doesn't necessarily have to hit as many home runs as Kyle Schwarber, but he's got to be, he's our Michael Jordan. He is the superstar of this team.
He stirs the drink.
And he needs to be that guy again. Look at him. I mean, he's smiling now. He says everything that happened with Dombrowski's behind them. That's good because we don't need that type of a feud. I think he still wants to be a Philly.
And he's still got years to go on his deal. He's getting paid a ton of money.
I don't want to see us trade him because of bad blood. I hope he still wants to be in Philly. He seems like it. He's on the WBC.
I think signing his buddy Schwarber helped. I think having Trey Turner here helps.
Is he ready to go to really come back and make a legitimate run this season?
So the best thing I heard about him recently, I think he was doing an interview here as things start off for the World Baseball Classic. He was talking about his approach last year, and he himself came out and said that he was forcing it, that he was swinging not at his pitch, that he wasn't being patient enough at the plate. And I think it was his dad that reminded him, wait for your pitch. You may only get one in a bat. That's kind of an old baseballism. I'm sure your son gets to hear this now, that you may only get one good pitch to hit in a bat. But when it comes, you got to be ready for it.
Got to be on it. You got to be on it.
And so, it sounds overly simple. I get it. But players get into bad habits throughout the course of a year.
Yeah.
And
it
can spiral.
Remember this, too. He was hurt. I mean,
yes.
we often do not know the extent of injuries. We talk about that a lot when we talk football.
Yeah.
We just don't know what these guys are battling. And he was battling the wrist thing. Obviously, I think that had an impact. He says he's
probably
better.
Trying too hard to get back to that next
level.
And
I think he says he's better, so let's hope he's looser. Boy, if he could just come out and start the season, and maybe the WBC, maybe this is, and I know people kind of hate it, but maybe this is a good way to loosen things up a bit.
Step up the competition quickly. Because that is the good part about this, is that the World Baseball Classic, you see great competition. I got to see some of these games when I was down in Florida about 10 years ago. It's a who's who of who's top dog in baseball.
It's sort of like the All-Star game,
yes.
but actually real baseball, so to speak. So that's phenomenal. Well, it is time to talk about our
Speaking
In the Spotlight series. We're excited. So we brought this back. We interviewed our sports director a couple of weeks ago. Boy, she gave us a lot of great insight on Penn State. Mark Wogenrich from SI, also just remarkable stuff about the new regime under Matt Campbell. And now this week we shift our focus to baseball. Our In the Spotlight interview, Dan, I'll let you introduce it because you're one of his biggest fans and you listen to him almost every day.
Yeah, so I guess I'll preface this by saying, Jim Duquette is a former general manager of both the Orioles and the New York Mets. I know we're letting a New York Mets guy on our show. It is what it is. But
he's famous enough, we'll allow it.
It will allow it. He also works for SNY, doing pre- and post-game coverage for the New York Mets, and he is on a radio show every day other than Saturday on Sirius XM. He works Power Alley from 10 to 1, Monday through Friday, then the front office 10 to 1 on Sundays. I end up listening to most of all this coverage. And I thought I knew baseball. I was this, son of a gun. I know Major League Baseball really well. Until I started listening to Jim and his co-host Mike Farron every day. These guys are as dialed in as you can get. They go over stats. They go over the inner thinking of how front offices work. How do you build a roster? And I owe a lot of my baseball knowledge today to Jim Duquette, I can
Well,
tell you that.
and as a fan, how important is that? Because again, you hear about a tiff between Bryce and Dave Dombrowski. How much of that is fluffed up in the
Contrived, right.
media, contrived in the media? And we talk about how important is it to add pieces. And he didn't have a great GM tenure. Now he was maybe set back by the ownership a
Correct.
bit. But just listening to the behind the scenes stuff, how does that shape your knowledge about how a team operates, especially in the offseason?
I think it's very critical to have that insight because, again, as fans, we assume we know. We assume that we know how the agents
Armchair
work with,
experts, right?
the general managers, but there's politics. There's players not wanting to go to a certain part of the country. There's players that want their contract to be structured in a certain way. It is truly wild. I mean, we deal with a little bit of this in TV, but when it comes down to individuals, it's a tough gig, and I really respect someone that can run a front office because, again, there's more to the game than you assume.
Well, and we do talk a lot about the NL East. He gives us his thoughts on the Phillies, and like you, he's fairly high on them. So without further ado, it's time to go in the spotlight. Here's our interview with Jim Duquette.
Well, we have a very special guest on Weather Wagers today. We have none other than the Jim Duquette, which, Jim, you don't know the backstory totally, but I've been listening to you for now over 10 years. I discovered you and Mike Farron actually by going down to Florida to escape the cold and going to spring training games. And one day I popped on your show, and I've been literally listening ever since that in the front office with you and Jim Bowden. So really appreciate having you on. So just talk a little bit about, for our listeners, your background in baseball, your career, and how you got here into the media world.
Yeah, it was kind of a different way, different route that what most other people have done. I didn't go to school for the media or communications. I really, because my cousin, who's about 7 years older than I was, he was already in the front office in baseball. At the time when I was in college, he was with the Brewers, and then he moved on to the Expos, and then was with the Red Sox. He was GM of the Expos and Red Sox, and so that was kind of my pathway. I followed him, and he got me involved with the front office with the Mets. I started early in my career as the Mets, and I was like an assistant at the minor league level. I mean, to the point where I was writing checks and paying bills and checking curfew for our minor league players, and they were about 3 or 4 years older than me, and I'm running them down, tracking them down. So that was my first start in baseball, and then I gradually made my way through the Mets organization with one stop with the Astros as a farm director back in '96. But most of my early career and most of my front office career was with the Mets up until 2005. I became general manager there in '03 and '04. Then I left at the end of the '05 season to go to the Orioles, and I was co-GM with Mike Flanagan there. And then I got into broadcasting just kind of like on a whim. The owner of the Mets suggested I go talk to somebody with the Mets TV, the SNY in New York, Kurt Gowdy Jr., who's was in the media for, his whole career and got a lot of people started in the career. So I sat with him for lunch, and he was like, why don't you just go on the air today? I'm like, what are you talking? He's like, all right, I'll try it. I'd done a bunch of interviews as a front office executive, and he said, hey, I think that was good enough. You could start it if you want to try it. And I tried it for a year, and I liked it. And I'm like, I'll just keep trying it for a year. And I've been kind of keeping that same mindset for now 15 years. Just give it one more year. Let's see what happens. It's worked out fine. So we'll keep riding it and see where it takes me. But I've really enjoyed the media aspect of it and trying to understand the different intricacies. The hardest part for me, I found, I don't know how you guys have, because it's different, obviously, when you're doing a podcast versus your own show, when you're doing the weather, like asking questions. I had a hard time asking. I always wanted to ask questions of what I wanted to know. That wasn't necessarily what everyone else wanted to know, and I tried to find, the happy medium in that. And that was one of the struggles. There's others too, but those are the first things I found were really the most difficult for me.
Well, I will say that, the longer I've been in this, your story is unique, but it seems like no matter what, people come into the media with all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different stories. So we're glad you made that pivot. We're glad to have you on today. Just real quick, you have a mid-state connection too. So our viewing area covers Lebanon County. And I understand you make almost a weekly trip up to Palmyra these days.
Yeah, so I go up to Palmyra in the Hershey area. There's a program that I've been a part of, an ambassador to the it's an all sports but complex called In the Net right there in Palmyra, Hershey. It's a huge complex. It's fantastic, beautiful place. I help with the baseball program there at In the Net. They're the Renegades, and we have a number of travel ball teams from 9U all the way up to 18U. They have this year we're going to have a college team as well, and they play out of there. And then they have 5 turf fields, and they play a ton of tournaments out. They play many multiple sports out of there, but primarily baseball, softball, and other sports like that. They play soccer out of there, lacrosse. It's quite the complex. I love it. They have a dome, an air dome there. It's really really well run up there as well. So I've been involved with that for like the last 3 or 4 years in particular, and I really enjoy it.
That's
Well,
really cool.
we appreciate, yeah, that is cool. We appreciate the local connection, Jim, and
Yeah.
we want to talk some baseball now because I know Dan. I'll let you start, but Dan, you're going to talk about the Phillies here because you listen to Jim's show every day, and I'll let you kind of tee up the more positive aspect of what we think the Phillies might be this year.
Yeah, so the background, Jim, is I tend to be the more positive Phillies fan, but negative Penn State fan. And
Okay.
Brett's flip. Brett's more negative after the last couple Phillies playoff runs. I'm a little bit more positive.
Yeah. Yes.
So I know you've been positive on your shows talking about the Phillies and what they have to offer for this year. Obviously, it was a pretty slow off season. The Bo Bichette contract negotiations didn't
Yeah.
go the Phillies' way. It benefited the team you cover most directly, the Mets. So, where does this kind of leave the Phillies? I still think they're a very good team, winning the division the last 2 years. I'm thinking 90 to 95 wins. I think you're thinking a similar wavelength, I believe.
Yeah, I think. Listen, I think that the two teams, especially and a lot of this is going to be dependent on how the spring kicks off
Mhm.
and health and all that. Like Wheeler in particular, how does he look? When does he come back? Right. That's a huge question. But I think it's we're starting to see that it's going to be a little more positive than maybe originally thought. But I think the Phillies and Mets are the two top teams in the division. I think that it's interesting the predictive Zips projections. Some of the analytics that we use in the sport have the Braves over the other two, and I don't see it personally. I think with the Phillies, the hard part is kind of getting that push into the postseason. I think their pitching, even without Suarez, is still going to be good. Especially when Wheeler comes back. I like their bullpen, and maybe
Me
their
too.
rotation won't be as good as it was last year, but their bullpen I think is better with Duran at the back end, and Keller, who's I think a sneaky sign, Alvarado for a full year. Like there's some things there I like. The offense is always going to be a question. Because they go through the ebbs over the last couple. They've gone through the ebbs and flows of a season, and sometimes you're sitting there going, "Man, how can an offensive group that good go through it's such a downturn?" Like I get that frustration, but I also think that it just takes a more off. I think an offense that gets hot at the right time where you can, like we saw it last year. Toronto's offense was pretty good, but in the postseason it was elite. And I feel like the Phillies could do the same thing. I think they're going to have to acquire somebody, to kind of go towards the middle of the lineup to kind of get to where the Jays were last year. So that's how I view them. They're pretty well balanced. They have a decent amount of depth. I'm not sure I like their depth versus some of let's say that like the Dodgers are just ridiculous. But I think the Mets have pretty good depth too. But I still think they're one of the better teams. And I'm not going to predict a downturn, like a significant downturn, even though that roster is getting a little older.
Well, I want to ask two questions here. Let's start with that roster. I'm a little down on the roster only
Yep.
because of the age thing. All these
Yeah.
guys are older, and now they're a year older. Do you think the Phillies did enough by getting a little bit younger and adding Adolis Garcia?
Well, I don't know. Like I've seen a lot of Adolis, and I'm not sure on the offensive side that you're going to see a huge uptick. I know what he did a couple years ago. I remember I was covering them in the World Series, and that run that he was on was an impressive run. And there's always a chance when you have him around Kevin Long that Kevin finds a way to get him back to that. But worst case, like he's gonna be an upgrade defensively. So he might not be equal to what Castellanos gave them, and then then the platoon there later on the offensive side. But I think there's a clear defensive upgrade. So I think that's where you're going to see the advantage for the Phillies would be in the run prevention area rather than the run production. I think there's still some potential upside there, but I'm skeptical of it myself, Brett. To be, I think it's fair to kind of think along those ways. I think their offense is going to have to come from other areas, and honestly, I think the outfield is probably one of the weaker ones because Crawford, I think, is not, he's a rookie, and it's going to be a struggle as well. And we've seen plenty of Marsh out there. I think what you've seen out of him is about what you're going to get.
Well, I agree with all of that.
Go ahead with your second question, Brett.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up because, Dan, you brought it up, Bo Bichette. And I just want to ask, from a fan standpoint, I think a lot of Phillies fans were waiting for this big signature move in the offseason to sort of upgrade that offense. And all of a sudden thought we had Bo Bichette, and then the Mets come in and kind of swoop in. I just wondered your opinion, as a GM. This was an odd scenario. How do you respond to something like that from a general manager's chair? If you're Dave Dombrowski, or even if you're on the Mets, how do you view something that happened with the Bo Bichette incident during the offseason from the GM's chair?
Yeah, that was such a stunning move. So I was watching it just from the Mets' perspective because they were pursuing Kyle Tucker at the time, and that thing finally came to a head on a Thursday night, and they lost him to the Dodgers. And I didn't know this until it came out later. The Mets had a couple of conversations with Bo going back to Orlando in the winter meetings. They had met with him in person. Carlos Mendoza, the manager, instructed Bo's brother, Dante, in the minor leagues for the Yankees. And Bo was around, so they had a prior relationship there, which I think maybe got underreported in all of this. But, the Mets pivoted so quickly. And I know I saw Dave Dombrowski's comments about, man, they thought they had an agreement. They didn't have anything officially in writing. And that's that's like GM 101, right?
Yeah.
Like if you got a deal, get a letter of intent, get a signature on there. And I've had those issues in the past where even with that letter of intent, teams can get out of, or a player can get out of that if another team's willing to go, without a physical, right? So it's usually pending a physical and all of that. They needed to get the signature on paper. They didn't, and I think that's where they fell short. And I understand, that would have been a huge acquisition for the Phillies. And I think that swing is what might be the difference in the division, really, because I did not like the Mets until they got Bichette. Well, all the moves that they had made, and obviously they got Peralta too. So that one's going to be worth kind of revisiting as the season goes on, and maybe even towards the end of the season.
So to kind of parlay off of that, looking at the division, I say to Brett often, there was some disappointment here this offseason, but I still didn't see, other than the Bo Bichette move, anyone in the division really take a large step forward. In some ways, I feel like the Mets took a step back. They lost Edwin Diaz. They lost some leadership with Pete Alonso. Yeah. And sure, now they have Bo Bichette. But talk to me a little bit about how you see the division. Atlanta now losing 2 starting pitchers potentially for a long period of time.
Right.
I mean, it still seems like they have good footing. The Phillies do in the division itself.
Yeah, they do have. I think they do have good footing. And I think, by the way, going back to the offense, I think Harper, based off of the way that hole was handled and not being elite and all that, I'm not betting against that guy anyway. And he said he doesn't need motivation, by basically saying, what Dave Dombrowski said about him. But if he stays healthy, he's going to put up big numbers. I think. Right. I don't know if it'll be MVP like, but it might be. I wouldn't bet against him. But I think with the Mets, their rotation was a disaster last year, and so was their defense. That was what really tripped them up, and why it was a slow, and it was like a steady drip on your forehead. It was just torture watching it. The decline of how bad. I mean, they just were just it's awful for like 3 months. The rotation is a little better with McLean for a full year. Peralta's really good. And so those other guys, it allows them to kind of sort out more back end rotation. I don't know how their bullpen's going to be. They definitely took a step back without Diaz, right? So, they're in, and I don't, the mix of it, I think they're better defensively, but I mean, they have a lot of guys playing different positions. And my experience on that is, it takes a little while to get comfortable in those spots. So Bichette at third and Polanco at first. And I mean, your guess is as good as mine. Like how, Soto moving to left field. Like I think it's going to be better in the long run, but they may lose some games early on because of the bad defense. And like you said, with the Braves, the injuries there, I still, it's hard for me to pick the Braves off of the season that they had and as little as they did this winter. And now you have 2 injuries to the rotation. I just don't see, like, you're really banking on them all of them having bounce back seasons offensively and their starters all staying healthy. And that never happens, So right. I still think, to the point, back to the beginning, it's like Phillies and Mets. And I would give the nod to the Phillies just based off of what they've done over the last couple of seasons in the division. Again, the postseason is a whole different animal, but to win the NL East, I think it goes through Philly until somebody knocks them off.
Well, you heard it here first, everybody. We will see how that goes. One more baseball question at large, then we'll ask you some weather questions, actually.
Sure.
But for fans, there's been some question as to whether or not baseball is going to happen next season. That is 2027. And again, from a GM perspective, what are the issues going on right now? And baseball's hot. I mean, they have new TV deals coming. The ratings are up. What can be done to save the season, or do you think it's already kind of written in stone that there's not going to be a season next year?
So I don't think it's written in stone that that we'll miss games. When the CBA came up the last time, as a strategy, the owners locked them out on December 1st. And that's likely going to happen again. They think that as part of the negotiation, that's good strategy. I personally don't think that's great. It's a terrible look for the game. I wish they would reconsider, at least push it until February or January, until all the signings have kind of come through, and they shut off communication between the teams and the players. I thought that was a disaster. We had several players that got injured that teams didn't know about and were surprised. So that happened the last time. We should have learned from those mistakes. We'll see if they do. But the biggest issue is you have a lot of owners and fans too worried about the disparity in the spending between the small market teams and like the Dodgers, Mets, Yankees, Phillies. You can throw them in there too. Those teams are willing to pay higher luxury tax fines, and the spending that isn't commensurate with the smaller market clubs. They're taking the money, and most of them are putting it in their pockets. They're saving it, and that's a whole different issue on both the players and the owner side. Like, they want a salary cap potentially. They want more. To do that, you have to have more revenue sharing. I'm not convinced the owners even have their house in order when it comes to how much revenue sharing they're willing to do. So that's a complicated factor in itself. And then you've got the players who say there's no way they're going to accept a salary cap. So, if the teams are really set on that, and they're convinced that their team valuations are going to go up because of a salary cap, then we will have a big fight. But I made this point yesterday on my show. The biggest issue I feel with having or forcing a salary cap, if you're the players, there's a lot of TV deals that are up in 3 years, right? The national stuff. What is that going to look like? Is that going to be huge money? how, if you even wanted to have a salary cap from a player's perspective, how do you factor that in? You don't even know what those revenues are. So until you have an understanding of that and what the streaming revenues are, I don't know how you could accept a salary cap. So I just think there's so many factors leaning towards, maybe a status quo or maybe some adjustments on the luxury tax that's how we end up going. But man, oh man, I hope we don't miss games. We haven't under Commissioner Manfred, and maybe that's the only other silver lining that we can hang our hats on at the moment.
Well, let's hope that's the case.
It just seems like deadlines have to force some change, but I think I'm with you that I think it's going to be relatively minor, and an overhaul of the system doesn't seem likely. Go ahead, Brett.
No, Dan, I was going to say let's pivot to weather now and how that affects baseball, because we know from snow and cold and an early spring to rain and thunderstorms in the summer and wind too. Baseball's got to navigate through that, especially for a lot of these stadiums that are open air. What are some of your favorite stories in your career or during the game regarding weather, if you have any, and how involved does the GM have to get when it comes to weather and baseball?
So we are, we're more involved, and we still are to some degree. I think with some of the technology and the measurements that you have at your disposal, and I know we used to rely on the local weathermen to help us out, meteorologists help us out with the direction of the weather. And now they still have a little bit of that, but they also have, tools at their disposal that they basically, the grounds crew will go out and show the umpires in real time. Hey, this is the weather. It's much more accurate than it used to be. And hey, they'll give them the heads up. Hey, this weather's coming in right around this period of time. They're very specific. It doesn't always happen that way, but it happens pretty frequently. It's much more accurate than it used to be when I was in the front office. I've been really impressed with it. So I think though with those, like, there's always the variable of, okay, hey, we should pull the tarp before the game's going to start because bad weather's coming in. You got your starting pitcher sitting there going, can you tell me when we're going to start? And of course, we have no idea when it's going to start, because he wants to know, he wants to have time. Hey, we're going to give you time to warm up. And, he has this whole routine and preparation that he goes through, and you're looking at you. And I remember walking in, many times, and they're like, hey, what, you got an update for us? I'm like, no, we're in a holding pattern. And they're like, when is there a window? Is there any window? Like, no, the window's closed. Like, we used to have these running jokes back and forth. There's not as much of that now, thankfully. I do have, I was trying to think of a couple of weather stories. One that this is going back now before I was in the front office, but it was Mets related back in the early 80s. It was a fireworks night. I don't think it was 4th of July, but it was like July 3rd. It was in Atlanta. Mets were playing the Braves. This is when they were playing in Fulton County Stadium. So this is 3 stadiums ago, and they had fireworks after the game, but they had this long rain delay, and this is before they had curfews too. So the game went into like the 2 a.m. period, and they played extra innings. It didn't end until 3:45 in the morning because of the weather. And then they shot the fireworks off at 3:45 in the morning in downtown Atlanta, and it set off this whole problem with obviously people living there. They didn't know what was going on. They thought there was much worse than just fireworks, and they got a ton of criticism. The league got criticized. That was one that stood out. I'll tell you another one, an oddity more than anything else. So I grew up in the western part of Massachusetts, a town called Dalton. It's near Pittsfield. Pittsfield had this long-standing stadium. It's over 100 years old, and the way they designed it, this was before maybe common sense was in place. The sun would set right in center field at 7 o'clock, 7:30. Well, what do you think happened? It's just second, third inning is going on. The sun was setting. You couldn't see the pitcher because the ball was coming right out of the sun, and they had to have a sun delay for a good 45 minutes to an hour until the sun would set on nights that they were at home and it was a sunny day. And this was the Cubs had their minor league affiliate there. They had to come up with strategy. Do they start a reliever? And then after the delay, bring the starter in. Like it was a major thing going forward. And so you would never think that you would have a delay when it was sunny out, but they did there in Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
That's wild. I mean, I do feel like baseball itself lends it, to these weird quirks, whether it's the shadows in the playoffs, which I know always happens. But do you still find yourself, in that old mindset of the GM? Like, what would you do in this circumstance? Would you delay the game? Would you get the starter warmed up? I mean, is that still ingrained in you?
Yeah, and yes, and we talk. I love talking about that sometimes too when it comes up, because you think that. And you guys know better than most, like the weather changes so often and the patterns change so much that you think that we would be able to predict it, more accurately, but there's still a lot of different variables that go on behind the scenes. And so, yeah, you are tempted. Like there were times even more recently where it looked like the rain was no question, no doubt going to arrive at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And you were going to have a delay of about 2 hours, and you didn't want to burn your starting pitcher.
Sure.
So one team would go with their starter, one team would go with their reliever. Sometimes with two teams would go with their relievers. There was one, and I'm trying to remember recently, where one team went the starter, one team went the reliever, and the team that went with the starting pitcher actually guessed right. It's really almost guesswork when you're that close. The starter was able to pitch.
Braves game last year that was similar to this.
Yeah, I think that's the one I'm thinking of, and they end up going with the starter and ended up working out for them. So, like even now, there are strategies that that work or don't. That the weather plays a factor in a win or a loss sometimes.
One last question, just to follow up on that. I've noticed with the scheduling being different now, where a lot of these teams, you play every team. They really are playing through a lot of the rain delays because there's not enough dates to reschedule these things as double headers. Right. Do you think does that get under the player's skin? I mean, I've literally seen games where it's really raining pretty good. The pitchers got the wet baseball. The commentators, the announcers are talking about it. But it just seems more accepted in the last couple of years, Jim, to kind of work through the rain because scheduling becomes a little difficult now that they're playing every team in the league.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brett, because there is pressure on the umpires. When you're in that situation, so it's defined as okay, if it's your last time in that city. Well, of course, if with interleague play, that's the only time you're going to be coming in. Or if it's the last series and you play the teams less in your division now, but if it's a series it goes, the decision is taken out of the team's hand and it's put into the umpires with Major League Baseball. And, they're trying to play through it because they understand that if it does get delayed and you can't play it, being able to restart it, isn't the easiest way to do it. We've seen this more often where the game ends up being turned to the other side, to the away side. Because you maybe have a 3-game set on the other opposing team's home site, and it ends up being a suspended game, which I like that. There's a new rule with the suspended game too, where you can pick it up right where it was left off if it's not an official game. They used to start the game over, which was another whole pressure there too. So they've tried as best as they can to manage that. The best thing would have been is if they just said, build every ballpark with a dome, a retractable dome, and just okay, you can have that beautiful weather when it's out there, and when it's raining, just pull the dome over. But I guess it's too late for that.
Yeah, I think it's too. I mean, even Steve Cohen, I think, went down that rabbit hole of trying to figure out how do you put a dome over Citi Field. Real quick, we'll let you go, but where can we find your work, Jim? And I understand you might be starting your spring training tour here shortly. That's exciting.
Yeah, so the spring training tour is going to start up for us on Friday. For me personally, on Friday on the east coast of Florida. Mets, Cardinals, Marlins, Astros, Nationals, that whole group Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday
Wow.
of this coming week. But you can hear all of those on our Sirius XM app or on the channel 89 at Sirius XM. My show's 10 to 1 Eastern time, pretty much every day of the week except for Saturday. So you can catch that when I'm not traveling. And I do some stuff for SNY. I know some people in your the area in the are Mets fans.
Oh,
There are
yes, we're
some Mets
surrounded
fans
by them.
around. So I've run into them a lot. So you can see me on SNY, their TV station, usually either pre or post game is the stuff that I do for them. I do about 25 games. So I got that going on as well.
Awesome. Well, Jim, again, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome.
Yeah, I enjoyed
take
it,
care.
guys.
Enjoy Florida.
You know what? I'm glad to get out of this weather and the snow for a little bit. And I know you guys are monitoring it closely. Hopefully we'll have some melting going on soon.
Yeah, give our
I think
best
we
to our
will.
friend Justin Robb and Jim Bowden
for
and
sure.
Mike Fair and all the guys out there.
I will. I would definitely do that.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, guys.
Well, so there you have it. What an interview. Jim Duquette, just amazing with his time and his insights. And Shiner, he likes the Phillies, doesn't he? I mean, he basically said he thinks the Phillies are going to be competing with the Mets for the division, but he likes our pitching, and he thinks, again, if we can hit it just right offensively, we should be just fine.
Yeah, and I mean, Dan's been harping on this the whole time that, I mean, our bullpen is pretty stellar, so we have some things to look forward to. I know you like to poo-poo the hitting here when we go into these little slumps and stuff, but I mean, they are still one of the marquee franchises in the MLB. I agree.
They are, and he was great. Funny stories about the weather.
Yeah,
and the rain delays that players
sun
have
delays
to,
even
and sun delays and
That's
fireworks
crazy.
delays. Just wild. But he was great. We want to thank him for that, and we should mention too one story we did not have a chance to talk about, but it does impact just about everybody that likes college football, and that is the passing of Lou Holtz. The great Lou Holtz passed away. And we want to send thoughts and wishes to his family and everybody that knew him. And, to those of us that didn't know him, we felt like we did, right? He won the national title for Notre Dame in 1988, the last national title they won. And he also was such a part for many of us of our adolescent years and our college years on College Football Final on ESPN. One of the few that did both coaching and media great, and really made a name for himself across different generations. A lot of people knew him as a coach. A lot of people knew him as an ESPN analyst, those late Saturday nights with Mark May and Reese Davis on
a voice that you'll always
Final.
remember, too.
Yeah. And Lou Holtz, one of the things that always stuck with me, and I'll share it here, is he always would say, Mike Greenberg always talked about this, but Coach Holtz would always say, make sure your kids know how much you love their mother. And I thought, wow, what a great sentiment, because, even if you have a great marriage, right, you bicker sometimes, you fight sometimes. It's really important your kids know how much you love each other and set a good example. And I thought, wow, what a powerful statement. And the best coaches offer those great life statements that Lou Holtz was able to do. Shiner, have you ever seen him do his newspaper trick?
Yes, I think I have.
Okay. He would be ripping up a newspaper, and then all of a sudden he would unfold it, and it would be together again. And it was just wild. You have to look it up if you haven't seen it. Rest in peace to the great Lou Holtz, and just one of the many, many great voices in college football, who is now gone too soon, and we wish his family the best. We want to hear from you, weatherwagers@gmail.com. You can always find us there. Our social media is listed. You know where to get us by now. And as I said, we're on ABC 27+. We're going to have more in the Spotlight interviews coming up. We're going to talk more about baseball, and all of a sudden, too, it's March Madness. Dan and I and Shiner are going to fill out our brackets and make a bet that may involve more food.
We always
good?
Love that.
We do.
I like to piggyback on when these food things come about.
Yeah, and I don't follow college basketball as much.
Yeah, you're just coin flipping it through anyway half the time.
You think so? Well, I know I don't think I'm going to pick Kentucky this year. Let's put it that way.
There you go. There you go.
But we're going to fill out brackets. It's March Madness season, MLB season starting soon enough. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. For now, I'm Brett Thackeray. For Dan Tomaso and David Shiner, Weather Wagers out. We'll see you next week.